It started with a slammed door and a casual shrug. "She needs her space more than you do," my mother said, not even bothering to look up from her phone. I stood there with my suitcase in hand, expecting maybe a hug or at least a conversation. Instead, I was told to move my things into the kitchen. Yes, the kitchen, so my sister Emily could have my bedroom for her mental reset. The irony? I had been the one working double shifts at a local diner to help pay off part of Emily's therapy sessions. I was the one who gave up applying for colleges so my parents could afford her fashion design school in New York. But none of that mattered now. The girl who once whined about how unfair life was now stood in my old room, redecorating like she was claiming a throne. I moved into the kitchen that night. My new room consisted of a creaky camping mattress placed between the fridge and the garbage can. Every morning, I woke to the sound of the blender roaring and my dad yelling at the coffee machine. My clothes were stored in plastic bags shoved under the sink. When guests came over, I was asked to stay out of sight so I wouldn't embarrass Emily's influencer image. One day, I overheard them laughing. Emily giggling. "It's kind of perfect. She was never really meant for the spotlight anyway." And my mother added, "She's always been more useful behind the scenes." Like I was some kind of prop they could tuck away. I stood there, invisible, in my own house, with tears stinging my eyes and rage hardening in my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just started saving. Every dollar I made, every tip I earned, I stacked it away like bricks, building something they couldn't see. My parents were so consumed with Emily's Instagram fame and travel plans that they never noticed I was working overtime, picking up tech skills online, learning digital marketing at night, and quietly starting a freelance agency under a name they didn't recognize. They forgot my birthday that year. Instead, they threw a weekend spa getaway for Emily. I spent that night alone in the kitchen, sitting on a milk crate, eating instant noodles while listening to their laughter echo from the living room. That was the moment I made the promise. I would never beg them for space again. I would own it. They gave me the kitchen, and in return, I was going to buy the whole house and decide who got to sleep where. Every time I wiped down a table or handed someone their change with a tired smile, I wasn't just working. I was investing in my escape, in my comeback, in the quiet revenge I promised myself on that cold birthday night in the kitchen. While Emily flaunted her designer clothes and posted selfies from Paris rooftops, sponsored by my parents, small sacrifices, I sat hunched over my second-hand laptop, building websites for small businesses, ghost managing influencer accounts, and learning how to monetize skills most people ignore. I studied every night between shifts, turning myself into something they couldn't define anymore. Not the helper, not the shadow, not the background extra. A year passed, then 2. Slowly, I moved out of the kitchen, not back into the house, but into my own rented studio apartment in the city. They didn't even notice. They were too busy helping Emily launch her lifestyle brand. Meanwhile, I was launching digital campaigns for brands 10 times her size. I stopped attending family dinners. My absence was barely acknowledged. They probably assumed I was still sulking somewhere. But the truth was, I was thriving in silence. Then came the opportunity that turned everything. A high-profile real estate developer needed a digital strategist and PR lead for their newest boutique hotel property, a restored Victorian mansion just on the edge of our hometown. I pitched, I presented, and I won the contract. My agency was small but scrappy, and I didn't tell the client it was just me behind the curtains, because it didn't matter anymore. It wasn't just any property. It was my parents' house. Their financial situation, so lovingly mismanaged while they pampered Emily, had caught up with them. The house was foreclosed, then sold to an investment firm. I only found out by accident while doing due diligence on the client, but I acted fast, quietly, privately, and without a single word to them, I bought the house. In cash, with my own earnings, no loans, no help, just grit and memory. I had it remodeled, but with care. I preserved my bedroom exactly how it was before Emily took it. I turned the kitchen, where I once slept, into a cozy guest suite with a plush daybed and brass fixtures, and the room Emily claimed for herself, I turned it into the janitor's supply closet, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Then I sent the invite, a classy envelope, gold foil, no sender name. Inside, a beautiful invitation to a private family homecoming and launch celebration. I made sure the invitation looked expensive, enticing, enchanting. My parents RSVP'd in seconds. Emily posted about it on her story within the hour, tagging mystery brands and speculating about sponsorships. The night of the event, I wore a sleek black jumpsuit and a smile I hadn't worn in years. I stood just out of view as they arrived, dressed to impress, expecting to hobnob with elites. My mother gasped at the renovations. My father whispered, "I think this might be one of those elite investor parties." And Emily? She waltzed in like she owned the chandelier above her head, until I stepped into the center of the foyer and said, "Welcome to my home." The silence was priceless. They blinked. My mother's face froze halfway through a fake smile. My father cleared his throat and tried to joke. "You're working here?" "No," I said. "I'm the owner." Emily laughed awkwardly until I pointed to the guest book where the LLC name was signed under mine. Then she stopped. That night, I gave tours to real investors, influencers, and business people who respected me. I was no longer the shadow in the kitchen. I was the architect of the entire evening, the one with the keys, the one with the power to let people in or out. I didn't embarrass them. I didn't raise my voice. I offered them champagne, smiled politely, and watched them fumble over apologies. But I didn't offer them a place to stay, because this time there truly was no room for them. A week after the launch party, the silence from my parents was louder than ever before. Not a call, not a message, not even one of Emily's signature passive-aggressive posts. I thought maybe they'd finally grasped the weight of what they'd lost. Not just the house, but me. Still, I didn't expect what arrived next. A plain white envelope slid under the door of the office space I'd converted from the old garage. No sender, just my name in shaky handwriting. It was a letter from my mother. Inside, she wrote that they were staying in a cheap motel outside town, that Emily had moved in with a friend after a falling out over something stupid, that they were broke, confused, and that the party had opened their eyes. She even added a line that stuck with me. "We never thought the girl in the kitchen would become the woman who owned the house." There was no outright apology, just excuses dressed in regret. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked through the halls of the home they never let feel like mine. The walls were mine now. The rooms were filled with my choices, my touch, my silence. The woman they underestimated had rewritten her story in the very space where she was told to shrink. And then I did something that wasn't part of the plan. I opened the kitchen drawer, pulled out the spare key, walked outside into the cool evening air, and placed the key under the flower pot by the back door, just like they used to for Emily when she stayed out late. Not because I wanted them back, but because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and strength isn't always about slamming doors. Sometimes it's about leaving one slightly open, not out of obligation, but because you've finally healed beyond the need for revenge. A month later, I hosted a charity gala in the backyard. Local businesswomen, young girls from mentorship programs, donors, and dreamers filled the space where I once served leftovers on chipped plates. As I walked across the backyard, one of the girls, barely 16, nervous and wide-eyed, tapped me on the arm and said, "How did you do it? How did you survive everything?" I knelt to meet her gaze and answered, "They tried to bury me in silence. I built a garden in it." And then I stood by the fire pit under fairy lights, watching them all laugh, grow, thrive. Someone leaned over and asked, "Who taught you how to fight like this?" And I smiled. "Bad parenting," I said. "It teaches you how to build your own home when you're never welcomed in one." The camera lights flickered as someone took a candid photo of me that would later go viral with a quote I hadn't even realized I'd said. "They made me sleep in the kitchen, so I made the house mine." That image was framed in the front hallway months later, replacing the old dusty family portrait that once hung there. I didn't need their faces on my wall anymore. I had something better. My story, my survival, my sanctuary. And just like that, the girl they pushed aside became the woman whose silence echoed louder than any scream. The girl who once cried herself to sleep next to a refrigerator had become the one people now looked up to. And the house they thought they owned? It no longer held their legacy.